Most empires are built on blood and gold, but this one was built on mud and a single broken saw blade. Before it became a billion-dollar symbol, John Deere was just a desperate man in a smoke-filled shop, watching his neighbors lose their minds, fighting a land that refused to be tamed. Everyone told him that nature was stronger than iron. He proved to them that it's all about how bright your steel shines. This isn't a story about tractors, it's a story about the man who made the earth sing. The story of John Deere doesn't begin in green factories, but in the smoke and soot of a small blacksmith shop in Vermont, at a time when a man's word was worth only as much as the strength of his work. John learned the meaning of loss early. His father disappeared on a voyage to England when John was only 4 years old, leaving his mother to raise him in poverty. That sense of insecurity and the hollow ache of hunger didn't break him. Instead, it forged in him a specific, rugged pragmatism that would later define American industry. He became a blacksmith apprentice at 17, and there, amidst the heat of the hearth and the ring of the anvil, he learned the most important lesson: metal doesn't lie. If you temper it too much, it will snap. If you don't work it enough, it will bend. However, the economic crisis of the 1830s hit Vermont like a storm. Debts mounted, and John, a man who preferred labor over bureaucracy, decided to do what all desperate men of that time did. He headed west. He left his family with a promise to send for them as soon as he built something, and with only a few tools in his bag, he arrived in Grand Detour, Illinois. There, he was met by a promised land that was actually a nightmare for every farmer. The prairie was vast, rich, and black, but it held a secret that the settlers from the east didn't know. Their cast-iron plows, which worked perfectly in the sandy soil of Vermont or Massachusetts, were useless here. That thick, sticky Illinois mud clung to the coarse pores of the cast-iron like tar. Farmers were forced to stop every few steps, pull out wooden scrapers, and clean the plow. It was a Sisyphean task, pointless, exhausting, and humiliating. People began to believe the land was cursed, that it couldn't be farmed on a large scale, and many seriously considered returning east, leaving their dreams behind in the mud. John Deere stood in his newly opened blacksmith shop and listened to these stories. He saw their tired shoulders and calloused hands. As a master of metal, he realized something no one else did. The problem wasn't the strength of the ox or the farmer, but the physics of friction. Cast iron was porous. Under a microscope, had he possessed one, that iron would have looked like a sponge that the mud gripped onto. The solution had to be something so smooth that the mud would simply have nothing to grab. The year is 1037. On the floor of a local sawmill, John notices a broken circular saw blade made of polished steel. In that moment, as the light hit that brilliant, smooth blade, it clicked for John. Steel was expensive, rare, and difficult to work with, but it had that one crucial quality: it could be polished to a mirror finish. He took that piece of discarded metal, brought it to his shop, and began to shape it. It wasn't just hammerwork, it was a surgically precise process of creating a curved shape that should, theoretically, shed the soil to the side as it passed through. When he finished, the plow looked strange, thinner, lighter, and shinier than anything the farmers had ever seen. They called it the singing plow because the sound of the steel cutting through the dense prairie grass was high and clear. John took it to Lewis Crandall's field. A group of skeptics gathered, men who had been at war with the mud for decades. John grabbed the handles, drove the horses, and a miracle happened. The dirt didn't stay on the plow. It simply curled and fell away to the side, leaving a clean black furrow behind. That plow didn't just till the earth, it plowed a path toward a new civilization. That was the moment John Deere ceased to be just a blacksmith and became the man who unlocked the American Midwest. The victory in Crandall's field was merely a spark. John Deere soon faced a problem that was entirely new to him: demand. While only yesterday he was shoeing horses and sharpening axes, suddenly farmers from distant counties were knocking on his door, ready to give their last dollar for that miraculous steel plow. But a massive obstacle stood in his way. The Midwest of the 1840s was a wilderness, cut off from the great ports and steel mills of the East. Quality steel was as rare as gold, and John had to rely on old saw blades and whatever scrap metal he could scavenge. John realized that if he wanted to feed a hungry market, he had to stop waiting for materials to fall into his lap. He made a radical decision. He moved to Moline, Illinois. Moline had what Grand Detour lacked: the Mississippi River. Water meant power to drive machinery, and the river was a highway for transporting goods. There, on the banks of the great river, John began to build a vision that went far beyond a blacksmith shop. He didn't just want to make plows, he wanted to manufacture them in batches, an almost inconceivable idea for agriculture at that time. However, American steel back then was of abysmal quality. John, stubborn and obsessed with what he called honest tools, refused to build inferior plows. He wrote letters to England, ordering special cast steel from Sheffield, which travelled for months across the ocean and then upriver to Moline. It was a staggering financial risk. While his associates told him he was crazy and that farmers wouldn't notice the difference, John responded with a sentence that would become the foundation of his company: "I will never put my name on a product that does not have in it the best that is in me." That wasn't a marketing slogan, it was a vow from a man who knew that a broken plow in the middle of the season meant a hungry winter for a farmer. But business lashed him from all sides. By 1848, the company was producing over 1,000 plows a year, but John was a craftsman, not a banker. His partnerships were turbulent. Partners wanted quick profits and cheaper materials, while John demanded perfection. Bitter splits followed. One partner told him, "John, if you keep making plows that last forever, we'll go out of business because people won't need new ones." John simply looked at him and replied that people would always need the best, and if he stopped innovating, someone else would take his throne. The financial panic of 1857 nearly broke him. Debts mounted, banks slammed their vaults shut, and farmers, hit by drought, couldn't pay. John Deere found himself on the brink of bankruptcy. His family home, his factory, everything hung by a thread. In that darkness, John made another pivotal decision. Instead of cutting costs, he focused on diversification. He began experimenting with new plow shapes for different soil types, realizing that America wasn't just one field, but a mosaic of different needs. In those years, John was no longer the lonely blacksmith striking an anvil. He became a man managing hundreds of workers, yet he still walked the factory floor every morning. They said he could tell if the steel was polished enough, just by the touch of a finger. His obsession with quality began to create something stronger than the metal itself: brand loyalty. Farmers began to link the name John Deere with security. In a world where everything was uncertain, his plow was the only constant. That bond between the man and his machine became so strong that people started asking for a Deere, even when competitors offered lower prices. But the true revolution, the one that would move from iron to engines and steel beasts, was still in its infancy, and John was slowly preparing the ground for the generation to come. While John was laying the foundation of steel and honor, his son, Charles Deere, was the one who would turn that foundation into a castle. If John was the heart and hands of the company, Charles was its brain and architect. In 1858, amidst financial turmoil that threatened to sink the firm, Charles took over the operational leadership of the business. It was a perfect generational blend: a father who knew how to make the best product in the world, and a son who understood how to get that product to every corner of the continent. Charles realized something that was foreign to his father: the old blacksmith, the power of distribution. He didn't want to just wait for farmers to come to Moline. Instead, he began building a network of sales centers, known as branch houses. These were regional warehouses that served as outposts for the factory. If a farmer in Kansas broke apart in the middle of a harvest, he didn't have to write a letter to Illinois and wait for weeks. He could go to the nearest John Deere center and get a replacement part immediately. This innovation in logistics was just as revolutionary as the steel plow itself. It created an unbreakable bond of trust. John Deere was no longer just a seller, he was a partner in the field. During this period, the company ceased to be just a plow factory. Charles pushed for diversification. They began producing everything from cultivators and seeders to wagons. Every new product had to pass rigorous tests that old John still personally supervised, even though he was officially retired. Farmers could now equip their entire estate with machines bearing the same name. This was the beginning of what we call today a brand ecosystem. However, with expansion came new, modern problems. It was no longer just about poor steel and sticky soil now, it was about patent wars. As John Deere became synonymous with success, Dozens of firms emerged, copying their designs. Courthouses became the new battleground. Charles spent a fortune on lawyers to protect his father's original, self-polishing plow design. It was a brutal time in early American industry, where the lines between innovation and theft were often blurred. Yet, John Deere survived because they were always one step ahead. By the time others copied last year's model, the Moline factory was already rolling out something lighter, stronger, and more efficient. One of the hardest moments for the family and the firm was the American Civil War. While the country bled, the demand for food skyrocketed, and the labor force on farms was decimated as young men headed to the front lines. This was the moment when mechanization stopped being a luxury and became an absolute necessity. John Deere factories worked day and night. Machines had to replace the men who were in the trenches. In that chaos of war, the company solidified its position as a national hero of agriculture. When the firm was officially incorporated as Deere and Company in 1868, John was already slowly passing the torch. He watched his small blacksmith shop turn into a city within a city. He no longer knew the name of every worker, but he could still smell the quality of the metal while walking through the halls. Charles, meanwhile, transformed the company into a modern corporation, introducing accounting, quality control systems, and what we now call marketing. Although they became a giant, they kept the family spirit. The workers in Moline felt like part of something bigger. They were building the tools that quite literally fed a nation being reborn after the war. This phase was crucial because it set the stage for the greatest leap in human history, the transition from horsepower to engines. John Deere survived generational shifts, economic crashes, and wars, but the true challenge, the one that would define the modern era, was yet to come with the scent of gasoline and the sound of the first pistons. Entering the 20th century was not just a calendar change for Deere and Company, it was a moment of existential crisis. The world was changing faster than any plow could keep up with. Horses, which had pulled Deere's machines for decades, were slowly becoming a thing of the past. A new enemy and opportunity appeared on the horizon, the internal combustion engine. The firm was already a giant, but a giant standing at a crossroads. The question was clear: remain a leader in manufacturing implements, or risk everything and join the race to build their own tractor. Inside the walls of the company in Moline, the situation was tense. Charles Deere passed away in 1807, and leadership was taken over by his son-in-law, William Butterworth. Butterworth was a conservative leader. He believed in security, and security lay in plows and planters. On the other hand, younger engineers and visionaries in the firm were shouting, "If we don't build a tractor, we'll remain just an accessory manufacturer for other people's machines." Competitors, like International Harvester, were already experimenting with massive, clunky steam engines. For years, Deere and Company spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on their own tractor development, but the results were catastrophic. Their prototypes were either too expensive or unreliable. The board was on the verge of giving up on engines entirely. But then, in 1918, the most important decision in the company's history was made. Instead of reinventing the wheel, they decided to acquire the Waterloo Gasoline Engine Company from Iowa. Why them? Because they had the Waterloo Boy, a tractor that was ugly and noisy, but incredibly durable. It was a machine that perfectly matched old John's philosophy. It wasn't there to look pretty, it was there to get the job done. Still, this purchase divided the board of directors. Many considered the price of $2.1 million, a staggering amount at the time, to be pure suicide. They believed the tractor was just a passing fad. Fortunately for us today, Butterworth yielded under pressure from those who saw the future. This acquisition transformed the firm from a tool factory into a tech giant. It was no longer just a company that forged metal, it became a company that assembled complex machines, gears, and engines. Adding tractors to the product lineup required a total overhaul of the internal structure. Salespeople had to become mechanics, and factories had to adopt assembly lines similar to those Henry Ford used for automobiles. However, shortly after the purchase, the Great Agricultural Depression of the 1920s hit. Crop prices plummeted, and farmers had no money for tractors. Deere and Company faced mountains of unsold machines. While other firms frantically shut down plants and laid off workers, Deere did something that is still taught in business schools today. Instead of chasing profit, they extended credit to the farmers. They said, "We know you don't have it now, you'll pay when you can." This move nearly destroyed the firm's cash reserves, but it created something money cannot buy: the lifelong loyalty of generations of farmers. The company showed that it understood the struggle of the man in the field, just as old John understood the sticky soil in 1837. This was the moment the company matured. They realized they weren't just machine manufacturers, but a pillar of the American economy. During this period, engineers were quietly working on the successor to the Waterloo Boy. The result was the legendary Model D, the first tractor to bear the John Deere name, which remained in production for an incredible 30 years. That tractor was the green beast that finally drove the horses off the fields. The firm now had everything: tradition, top-tier engineering, and the people's trust. They were ready for global dominance, but no one could have predicted that the world would soon ignite in another war, testing their capacities to their absolute limits. The transition into the second half of the 20th century and the dawn of the 21st marked a transformation that would likely have seemed like science fiction to old John. It was no longer just about the sharpness of a plow or the horsepower of an engine. The revolution became invisible, moving into bytes, sensors, and satellite signals. During this period, Deere & Company made a strategic decision that forever separated them from ordinary iron manufacturers. They chose to become technological leaders who manage data. The turning point came in the 1960s with the introduction of the new generation of Power Series. This was the moment when tractors stopped being just workhorses and became ergonomic, powerful command centers. Engineers introduced air-conditioned cabs, radios, and hydraulic systems that allowed one man to do the work that once required dozens. The firm realized that a farmer doesn't just want to survive the day; he wants to work with dignity and efficiency. However, the true quantum leap occurred in the late 1990s, when John Deere began integrating GPS technology into its machines. Today, a modern green tractor is not just a vehicle; it is a sophisticated robot that moves across a field with centimeter-level precision without the driver needing to touch the steering wheel. Systems like AutoTrack have enabled farmers to reduce overlap while plowing, save fuel, and optimize seed and fertilizer to the very last gram. The company has invested billions in software development, recognizing that information about the land is just as valuable as the land itself. Within the corporation itself, the focus shifted towards sustainability and precision agriculture. In today's John Deere factories, robots assemble engines and artificial intelligence controls the quality of every single bolt. Yet, despite this futuristic technology, the firm continues to face modern-day challenges. The right to repair has become a major issue over the last decade. Farmers, who for generations repaired their own plows with a hammer and a wrench, are now facing encrypted computer codes. This has created a new dynamic between the company and its users, where the tradition of the self-reliant farmer clashes with modern intellectual property. Today, John Deere is more than a tractor manufacturer. It is a symbol of American industrial survival. While many other giants disappeared or were sold to foreign corporations, Deere remained loyal to its headquarters in Marlene and its unmistakable green and yellow colors. That green, known as John Deere green, has become a cult symbol. People tattoo it, wear it on their hats, and it has become part of the identity of rural America and the world. It is not just the color of a machine, it is the color of trust that began in that small blacksmith shop in 1837. When we look back from a broken steel saw blade to autonomous tractors operated via a mobile app, the thread that connects it all is incredibly simple: problem solving. John Deere didn't succeed because he was the best businessman, but because he understood that the tool must serve the man, not the other way around. His name on a machine remains a guarantee that whoever sits in the cab or monitors a robot from the edge of the field has nearly 2 centuries of engineering struggle against nature behind them. The story of John Deere does not end here. It continues every morning when thousands of engines roar to life across the planet. It lives in every clean furrow and every successful harvest. It is the triumph of an ordinary man who believed that metal could and must be better. And as long as people need bread, that green will remain in the field's A color that reminds us that one good idea and relentless persistence can change the world from the ground up.